All right, welcome to Waxworks. This is Dell here. I'm going to go through the back catalog. Slap this one in the Seal to Deal playlist. Started with Dark Age of Man. Um, that's the first one we put out, Jason and I together. The Watershed RPG, as it's been called. The next one on the project, which I've put a placeholder here for, is the Space Age of Man Imperium Epic. Um, but that is in development and soon to come. It's just kind of a draft at this point, right? So a lot of the work hadn't been put in. I went on in Jason's game, the Big Country series, in his universe. I made little side games to this with his leave to use the universe. So the Big Country Go Golf. Now, at the time, I didn't think he had a hockey game, even though, ironically, it was in the book that I already had from him. It just didn't. There's various games in that book, and it slipped my mind. But I like hockey, so anyway, it's just a alternate version in his universe of hockey teams, and I love playing in that universe. He's got set up the Big Country universe. It was based off a 1940s movie called The Setup. You know, about a boxer, a minor circuit league boxer, and anyway, so we kind of built a universe around that with sports games that he has. So, but in that universe itself, the Big Country, I did these three games: Go Golf, Breakaway Hockey, and Take That Tennis. Which tennis, as far as I understand, it means take that, right? So a bunch of monks at the abbey was invented the game, here tale, and they would say take that whenever they're slapping the ball back and forth to each other. So we'll see. Maybe it's something I conjured up in my own mind, or maybe it's legit. Nevertheless, that's the name of the title, right? Um, you'll see later on. I'm thinking about binding these up into one book, which is a placeholder for that too. Boneyard Football is a game that I had the little epiphany that when you're rolling a dice in the casinos, you have to make it across the 50-yard line, right, for it to be eligible. And so I took that and I made a football game where it's very balanced player field at the table, but the game itself is about betting which one will get it. You know, no, the team wins more. You have to cover the spread. You know, so they get more leverage. So it's a betting game, but the actual game itself. Football is there, but the meta game around it is the betting. So if anyone wanted to have this game and have subscribers watch along or stream it or whatever, they could bet, and even if it's doesn't have to be, it's geared toward big money, right? So you're narratively betting for to see who comes out on top of that pile. A Demolition Racer made this for my son Spencer for some reason. It reminds me of him. Besides, back in the day, I used to love those Demolition Racer games on the video games. So, yeah, you can either play a derby mode on this or a racer mode, right? So you're trying to take out other cars as you play, and end up being the one who with the best time as well as the staying alive and not being injured. Down, it has a step down dice system, so cars start at D12 and work their way down to D with through injury being sustained to a D1 and then less, right? But they also when they're on the taking the segments of the track, if it's a race, there's also another die. The harder the segment or the more dangerous the segment of the race is, if you roll under, there'll be a track die over the side. So if you roll under that, it'll trigger a degradation of the dice, or either a did not finish. So, yeah, those two games I was building at the same time, I believe, and yeah, they were fun. I like them. Dungeon Time. Now, I took this again from Jason's Time series. Um, he's got this time series of games that he created that uses grades, um, basically grading ability against another ability, like a contested ability, or either grading against, which some of what I did in these games, grading against, like golf time against the course difficulty grade. So you have charts, so you cross reference the grade and you roll, and it tells you what happens on it. So, but I had fun with these games. I wanted to delve into them. There's quite an array of games. I kind of focused on games that were more so something that the weekend warrior would partake in. In fact, that's what the ultimate compilation of these games is called, the Weekend Warrior Edition. You know, where Jason handled the larger group games, football, hockey, etc. So he's got hockey time, football time, the whole nine. But this is a little diversion of it, which dungeon time is probably the one that you know, for the armchair warrior, as it was, or the tabletop warrior, to get in there. But it reminds me of the old Choose Your Own Adventure books. Got that one, which, you know, different areas. There's a map in there, and different areas you go into. You'll pull up specific modules. For the die will tell you which page number to go to exactly, to see how different areas are resolved. You know, and every dungeon has a certain level of depth that you're going through, and that's what that game is. Now, Jason added something that I'll explain a little bit later to it that brought it overworld. Golf time, yeah, the players, each individual player plays against the field. Now, I've already had Go Golf back here. Big Country Go Golf, a little bit different. Like I said, Golf Time uses Jason's engine. I like it. Turned out really well to my liking. Bowling Time. So all of these games here are meant for just the, you know, like somebody could partake in, like working during the week and partaking in on a weekend. Whether you're dungeon delving at the table, or you're out playing golf or bowling or fishing or pool, even dart time. This is the most probably complex version of it. I would say probably this, or either I wouldn't say convoluted, but necessarily the, you know, dungeon time is pretty dense. But this here is probably the more mathematically intricate, as far as like in and the game that is less. It has a little bit more hands-on, as far as you get to choose what you're aiming at, and you roll to see if it actually achieved it or not, or if you missed your mark and how bad you missed it. So that's what dart time is. Now this Cage Rage is kind of a micro game. It's small, but it's MMA, and it uses step die, or basically a different tier of dice. Now there's a game in here that isn't, or levels of dice comparatively to your opponent. You roll and see the difference. So this is a little bit. I like it in that it's unusual, because normally in the what Jason referred to as dueling dice, he'll mention that whenever he's talking about some games design, which this has it in there. You know, normally the higher level dice is the more competent die than the other. You know, which the other one has a less of a potential. This Cage Rage isn't built that way necessarily, because there's thresholds that each die has to achieve, and the smaller dice will roll the upper number quicker, percentage-wise, than the higher dice. So while in the immediate area, like if you got a D8 as opposed to a D4 or D6, you're going to roll higher, you know, more so than the D4, but the D4 is going to roll and get to roll and explode on a 4 and pass it. But it also, whenever you explode, it has a chance of either knocking your opponent out or making them tap out. So it's just two different ways of approach on this. Actually, this was kind of born. Cage Rage was born from the mechanism I used in Big Country Golf. because that was like more of a power hitter as opposed to more of a green, uh, on the green specialist. So whether it had a light touch or heavy touch, it get you there quicker, or either another way of handling it. If you're a green specialist, is you get a lot enough touch to make it into the hole or go to your home, as Happy Gilmore would say. We get Dart Time, Cage Rage, um, ringside boxing. Now this is similar to Cage Rage in a way. When the boxing mechanism came up, and I told Jason about it, he had this concept, took it and ran with it with cards, utilizing cards. So every card you pull, it could be a quick boxing game, but you're pulling and laying down the cards, and the cards will inform to what boxer you're utilizing. So you could just pull two different cards out, and they compare them, the stack, and then the card would determine what the boxer is, and you progress through the game with those cards informing you. Um, Grit and Glory. Now this is a football game, obviously, but it's based off of six-man football, which seemed to be kind of primarily popular in the state of Texas with the smaller schools, the high schools, and whatnot. Um, it's really impactful. It's a little bit different. It reminds me of football like we used to play out when I was a kid, out in the backyard when you only had so many players. And there's rules that are in the game that kind of inform that. But you can obviously see if it's not 12-man football and only six on the side, there's going to be moments that there's gaps and there's going to be breakaways more so than the other. So these games usually have a high scoring you know tally at the end. Even more so, even that there's a mercy rule that if the teams run up by, I believe, 45 points midway, they'll just call the game. So that's what Grit and Glory is. So it's a little bit of exploration into that type of football. I believe the football field is reduced to about 80 yards as opposed to 100. So they're playing on standard football fields, but they just bring the goal post. They don't move them outwards, they move them in. Ruck and Rugby. Uh, I like this. Now, some of my games I try to I want the roles to be analogous to the feel of carrying that football. And in rugby, it isn't downs. It isn't anything like that. You start, and as long as you throw the ball laterally back to someone on your team, you can keep running down the field. And whether you're held up and tackled, or whatever before you go down, you keep that ball in motion. You throw it back, and they keep running. So I wanted that kind of explosive type uh, feel of from player to player, and is seeing how far you can get down the field, or keep the ball moving to get a try, as it were. The rules are on there to explain it, but I use what I refer to as like a craps based mechanic, to where you're rolling it, and as long as it's not a seven, ironically enough, you're going to hit a seven before you win anything else. You can keep that ball moving. And I could have a misrecollection of that as far as being doubles, because there was another time I've used that mechanism, maybe conflating both of them. But you keep the ball rolling to try to get uh, a score at a try at the end, right? Uh, Rugby, even, you can run, and it's not really overly um, utilized, but you can run and kick kick through the uprights for points as well, while you're in motion. But anyway, great little game. I like playing that myself, as far as something being feeling like it's analogous, and the ball keeps throwing. You keep rolling dice and seeing if you can get there. So definitely a pressure luck. Better Up Baseball. Now, what I did, a lot of my sports games, I like to look at the statistical probabilities. Kind of, you don't want to play a game and have it be out of so much out of whack that is not representative of scores that the game can produce, and often does produce on the baseline, as far as baseline scoring. So Better at Baseball is definitely a game that is It utilizes a different all D6, but and you'll go down the batters line. So every team has a number of batters. You roll for every position's um, strength, as it were, or his on base percentage. Not at bat, but necessarily on base is what I was pretty much getting to, as far as like making it statistically, it adhered to the statistics. When you play, you will, if the batting average is low 220 or so, or you're around that area or below, you're going to get just one colored dice of the four that you have, right? And every dice represents pretty much a base. Make it around a bases on that, but you have to roll, 6 to achieve. Uh, it's rolling. Yeah, if you roll four sixes, it's actually a home run. But you have to roll the colored dice, are the dice that is different um, for that particular batter. If if a batter rolls, pretty average, up to 300 or so, he's going to be rolling two of his four dice are going to be different. And if a batter is over 300, three of his dice will be different. Now, this affects like if those different colored dice are the ones that have to turn over a six before the other dice, before you can even count the other dice, right? So if you get a six on an average dice, it doesn't get you on first base, so to speak. But you have to have at least one of the colored dice come up to make sure you can get on base, and then it rolls around. So statistically, when you're rolling these dice, and the probabilities of them coming up matches and syncs up with on base statistics. So when you're rolling and you're going down the batter lineup, and you see how much, whether you're out, you roll one time to see what he gets. Not every roll, to see where the batter gets around, and see what happens. Like if you got two men on base and you roll that, and you just total it up as you go. So that's how you play batter up baseball. Um, it's priced pretty low for what I believe it contains. As far as a game. So yeah, look at that is a good value and pretty much right statistically with baseball statistics. But anyway, a great little game in my estimation. Wrestling Time, going back to Jason's time engine. So when I did this, it was very interesting because I've did a couple of wrestling games, and this is the only one I've put out so far. Another one is based off basically from the sponsor's point of view, and I was kind of building that from Jason's big country perspective. But this here wrestling time, yeah, it's interesting in its makeup and the way that you're going to have your heels as opposed to your, just you could have it's left and right. There's a tracker basically, and what you roll when you match up the wrestlers and how effectual that they swing the momentum back and forth. And you'll see momentum play out in another game that I made, a boxing game in particular. But this wrestling time momentum, it'll swing toward the other end of the spectrum, and when it does, it gives um, power to whenever you roll an effect, if it comes up an effect, or for special to happen, when you could potentially pin somebody, you got to be on a favorable side of the track, your side of the track, and in your control basically. That mechanic, like I said, does roll over into being utilized later on down the line into the boxing game that I created. But it started here with Wrestling Time. So it was with Jason's engine, and then conceiving of how to apply his engine and use it as a tracker to move momentum back and forth, and then that determines the what the specials create, or the special moves or whatever. And every wrestler can have his own body of special moves, which this falls over into Flash KO. But yeah, it was good. A good time. I think this holds a lot of potential for some, especially for some uh, creative narrative moments, as well as getting to be a little bit outlandish, with the characters' names and the wrestling names. The book does have a list of generic wrestling moves and whatnot that you can apply to each. And the more competent they are, the more of a varied move list they can get. So whenever you roll to see what happens, that number applies to a certain move, and you'll see. It's kind of a narrative that you can, or a narrative game that plays out in front of you that you roll and find out what is occurring. So you're more of either a commentator or a witness. A lot of these earlier games of the time series, aside from maybe being in the perspective as the fisherman, in fishing time, but like I said, dark time, you're doing a little bit more. There's more player agency in there. But a lot of the games, it's like, but fishing time is a relaxing game. You just roll and seeing how many fish you get in, and pull in there in a way, because it's set up on a tournament type basis, right? So you can move about from place to place and fish in different areas and try to hit that big strike and land them. Pool time has a really unique mechanism too that I like. That was pulled from, no pun intended, from the mechanism. It's just I took his mechanism and I tried to bend it or tweak it in certain ways and express it in a different way and find a certain game that would best express that mechanism, or that version of Jason mechanism, which I had a blast doing that. Obviously, you see dark time, pool time, fishing time, bowling time, golf time, dungeon time, wrestling time, and all of these end up going into one compiled book. All right, so you can get the whole book with all the wrestling, all the time series, the Weekend Warrior time series. Right here, backboard basketball. Now, this is a game that's akin to the Better Up Baseball in the fact that, you can play this game in two ways. You got a series of D6s that you roll together to go from quarter to quarter to tally for the total of baskets that are made. And then there is, a list of teams that you can play up against. I think from 1925 is where I pulled them from. 2025, Lord knows, is where I pulled them from. So you can mix and match and play different teams against one another in two different ways. So you can do that with backboard basketball, either having, a blanket number of dice you roll, or you can get a little bit more detailed and have, you can buy sides of dice. So every team has a certain number of points they can expend on buying dice. Whether you spend 4 points on D4, 12 on a D12, you roll them in, for that position, you've only got 5 positions on a team. So you buy what you can buy and you roll, and hopefully there's going to be more points scored on whatever position. Obviously a point guard or something like that, you might want to have the larger on, but it could, it doesn't matter really ultimately. But there's a little bit of aspect of that if you want to delve into a little bit deeper and curate and cultivate and build your team in that respect. But it also has a little bit more of a streamlined way to play where you're using D6s. And it is statistically, score-wise, right up there. I think generally in backboard basketball, you're going to see a score of about 114 on average for the average team. It's going to dip down a little bit or maybe edge up a little bit. But, on the D6 version, there's teams where if their defense is good, whenever you're just rolling the linear static roll to compare, per quarter, there's going to be a deduction depending on who you're facing. You know what I mean? Or a plus if your offense is real good. So you do those rolls and then you add and subtract. You add what your team is good for, and then you subtract what the defense of the other team makes you subtract off your total, and you do comparison and see where it lands out. So you could do a series of games of this, and it's pretty streamlined and fast to get through the games and have seasons or whatnot. Of backyard basketball. Now this 3v3 basketball, I love this game because, I mean, to me, to sit down and play this game, it's like the craps craps-like engine I used with Ruck and Rugby to keep it going, and I just wanted to express that. It's a lot of basketball games are hard to get. What I see a lot of is just rolling to see in comparing tables and stats to see how many points were made. But I wanted a feel of passing that ball back and forth to one another, and I thought the most succinct way I could do that is the 3v3 basketball. I think this was even an Olympic sport at some period of time, if it's not now, you know. But you got three guys on a half court, and you know, when I'm rolling these dice, and there are a lot of rolls, and when you're going down the list, what's great to me is that it's not having to be possession based. It's not having to be whatever. I literally can put an egg timer down there and set it for 10 minutes, or set a stopwatch for 10 minutes, and it'll go off. So the first 1 to 21 wins this, and you can write the score down as you get it, whether it's 1 point or 2 points, and add it up. The first 1 to 21 wins, or whenever that egg timer goes off, you stop and you calculate both points to see who won. And you can generally do it. You don't have to be necessarily rushed, but a solo player can roll this. Hey, you could even play with somebody else, but a solo player could roll it. And according to 2D, the 2D6 you have, and even on the cover here, you see there's a blue and red dice. A lot of the games are folded over into blue and red dice, especially the Flash KO. But, you know, from one side to the other side. And depending on whether the results are even or odd or a double, you know, or this right here, actually, you know, a 7 is 1 point. Most of them are a double is 2, but depends on the die that comes up, whether it's even or odd, whether the opposition gets the rebound or the current team with possession keeps it. So when you're rolling, you'll know which side of that track or which side of the score track that you're adding points to. And whenever you roll something, you know when there's a hit, and then if the hit goes back into the basket or field goal, a basket is made, it'll bounce back off either to the opposition or to your, you know, to the ones that currently have the ball, and you keep going like that. So the ball will switch. So almost visually, as you're rolling this dice, you can see the play progress in real time from one hand to the other, right? And then that's 3v3 basketball, and it can be played literally when the dice hit the table at 10 minutes or less, right? Flash KO. Now this game went through, like, geez, I made this game for Jason. I know he's a big boxing fan. I used to watch boxing with my dad back in the day too, and he did too. But yeah, this game went through 3 iterations. I mean, I had this game as using a mechanic of card base, to where if you got in the affirmative, it would rotate the card 1. You know, your opponent would have a card 2, and it would rotate it to the right or to the left, and encounter like 2 gears opposite rotating each other into more of a favorable position for you and a less favorable position for you. You know, if you happen to win that dice contested dice roll, it would roll in one favor, so it would switch momentum that way. Like I said, I pulled momentum from the wrestling time, basically. With this Flash KO, I ended up just using a tracker. Ultimately, you know, the two, having to manipulate the 2 cards constantly is good in theory, but it's not good in practice. So I had to pull that back and rebuild from the ground up. So it took me a good while to have this one see the light of day. And when it finally did, I think it came out great. You know, on that same tracker, and it's not that far, but if you can, I mean, as far as like spaces to get to the red side or the blue side, which is traditional, you know, corners and boxing, to have the momentum up, and whenever you trigger something. Now I use a very different mechanism a contested die mechanism in this. Uh, I'm kind of proud of it. I like to think that it's probably one of the more advanced. I know it's probably one of the more non-intuitive but hard to wrap your head around. But so at least the approachable learning curve it seems frightening, I suppose, to some. But I thought it was worth worth the chance to get it out there and see how people take to it, because once it clicks, it's easy to interpret. One of them simply is the margin of difference between the dice, the overall, and the other one is the threshold for rolling. It's an inside and an outside threshold. So the outside margin is if you beat your contestant by a large enough margin, it will trigger a certain effect. If you beat your contestant with a small number and you still beat them, say if it's 1 or 2 or 3, if you land on that 3 and you beat them, then it triggers another effect. So there's 2 different ways of looking at the dice when they're rolled to see if somebody can win the contested roll and get momentum, like a shift of momentum. But if you want momentum with an effect, whether it's a stagger or whether it's some kind of a KD point taken, you've got to secondarily hit those other thresholds, right? And according to the threshold you get, whether it's an outside margin or whether you're the inside threshold, beating them by a low enough number and you still beat them, it'll trigger another effect. And this allows the boxers to be able to get more so varied, a little bit of flexibility in kind of representing the boxer. Because if you had a boxer with an outside threshold of 3, he has to beat the other by a margin of 3 to do the effect. But if the outside margin is 2, he just has to beat him by 2 or 1, right? So there's a trigger. He could be triggering a lot of effects on one side of the dice, and then on that inside threshold, if he is 3, if he won by 3, just a larger number up on the dice with 3, then it would trigger that other effect. But he could just be 1, basically a tie. And the only way you'd win that is if he had momentum at the time, to trigger the effect. There's 2 different representations of that. So it's definitely a curve to learn it. But I think what the dice and the momentum chart, when coupled, and those thresholds can produce is a satisfying level of explanation being extrapolated from those situations. So once you get over it, and once it's second nature, believe it runs really well. Now Jason took this and he took that engine and he actually created a Canadian boxing game, American boxing game, and a Canadian football game, American football game, and it's kind of like arena football, right? Arena football game. IFG, I believe, is what he calls it. So, but anyway, the Weekend Warriors is all those time games that are compiled into the Weekend Warriors set and get that as a book. We've kind of learned through play that using these spiral bound books, you can just open them up and you've got the chart right in front of you, where the book's not trying to collapse in on itself. And you can just lay them out and use whatever chart you need at the table to roll dice and reference. Right, so you get a lot of the times game have charts that you just cross reference with the roll result and see what you got. So you have to have something very friendly to the table to be able to read those charts, right? This is actually the first time that I had utilized any kind of AI for the art. This right here, I would pull art off of different things. I think the 3v3 basketball was AI. I pulled every kind of art, like free clip art off the internet. So all this stuff beforehand was that, type in free and just put a little art here or there. But it's added a little bit of layer of complete, even though it's very hard and difficult difficult to deal with sometimes. Uh, if I tell it to create a cover for this, for example, it would create. I would want all the aspects of the game in inside here. I'll go ahead and show you like this. I would try to put all the major sports on the backside. It shows the rest of the sports, right? That are all in there, from pool to fishing, to wrestling, and it would put it in. I'd tell it what kind of scene, but it was constantly and chronically, like it would put the bowling pin sitting on top of the top of the pool table, or the tennis racket would be melted and rolled to the side, or the dartboard would be literally over the window or something. So it was. Yeah, just when you think you had one thing right, it would mess up on something else, right? So, uh, yeah, that in itself. But I got it to a point to where I was somewhat satisfied in what it came up, so I went ahead and accepted it. So it was able to get my name and Jason's name uh, up there, so it finally got there. But it was a bit. It did test my patience. Just put it that way. Um, hold on. Here we go. Tennis time. Yeah, I added that as a late addition to the Weekend Warrior collection. So I actually added tennis time too. Uh, no, I think I did do a go golf. I mean, a big country tennis. Yeah, take that tennis, of course. So I redid that and added it to the game just as I was created that. So it adds another game to it. So it's good grief, 6 games in there, I think. In the Weekend Warriors collection that you can have at the table and play. Now after the Times game came through, um, my my Bridget, she loves some poker, right? So I wanted to. Yeah, I had this concept for a poker game or a poker like game, and I went down that rabbit hole and made like 5 different games. Well, first of them was Breeze Bank, which that's just short for her. Yeah, it's her nickname, right? So that, but these ended up being a really good collection of games. And the Breeze Bank started out, and then I had another concept for another version of it. It started to be down that threshold. I think it was 5 games, but I'll put a pin in it right here. Flash KO, the boxing game, like I'd spoken about earlier. Uh, I went into detail about explaining how that game acts. Jason actually made, um, an expansion basically for the heavyweights to be added to this, which we'll get up there a little bit. But Breeze Bank, Breeze Brick House, since the theme here, Breeze Wild House. So these are all different. Ultimately, you're trying to get a hand of, a poker hand in one way or another in different way, and they flex in complexity. And I laid them out in the book, the collection, from more or less the easier. Um, it's so strange though, because when I started doing this, it's either easy and something that a kid might play, and it gets a little bit more involved or strategic. Breeze Bank is probably one of the more, it's middle of the pack, uh, or of the 5. Maybe it's the number 2 as far as complexity and difficulty. Um, and it's not that it's not this overly complex as far as like learning how to do it, but I'm talking about that it requires more of a strategic play and thought and consideration. It's less of a casual, just kind of party environment. But like I said, the whole collection explores that. No, I'm sorry, not Breeze Bank, but Breeze Brick House gets more complex. Breeze Bank has where there's a bank of a jackpot bank that you can get. A lot of that'll be building while you're that, and it may have there's different things that trigger it to open up, and you're playing against the cards anyway that are going around there because the house. a lot of these have the house cards that you have to. Once you beat the house, you open up the bank. You can beat others, and win that money. So it's like a two-tiered, two-level access to money. Not to be real money, obviously, but it could be uh, coins or tokens or chips or whatever. Bree's Wild House, Bree 2-3. This is probably the easiest game of the bunch that you would want to start out with. So that's 1, 2. House Bank is 4. I believe that there's 5, or maybe there's just 4. But it's a very, I'm proud of the way it came out. That it stepped things up, and it explores and expresses different types of play that that can be. It just utilizes the poker hands that the object of what you're trying to build, but it explores different types of what makes poker fun, and also a little bit of a depth of strategy whenever you, aside from the social the social uh, bluffing aspect, you know, uh, there's a little bit of strategy too, and that aspect, and just the casual aspects. Some of it gets pretty tense, and other ones kind of laid back as far as the game. So there's definitely a myriad ways to approach it and enjoy it, and pick your poison, as it were. There's a whole collection of them. But I made them individually as I went along, with little epiphanies or whatever would strike me as like, oh, that would be cool to add or to look from that perspective. The Weekend Warrior Time series, the unpublished draft right now. I'm going to do a little bit of change to that. It's the book version. Um, Considering some of these books for like books rather as uh, global release. So that's why that's on hold, but you can still get it otherwise through Lulu. A rundown. Now this occurred to me as a card game. I think it actually probably ended up being. Um, yeah, I made this for the sister and her family. Live their life at the ballpark, and we used to play baseball out in the yard constantly and chronically all the time growing up. So I can see where she got her love for it. But she's put her kids do that, so they live for it. But I had this concept. I'm always trying to stretch and reach for what my mechanically might be something satisfying or a different way of approaching it, thinking outside of the gamer's box, as it were. But I need that criteria has to be at least um, friendly and understood. My dad used to say in game development, use the KISS rule, keep it simple, stupid. So I try to boil it down. I try to have mechanics that can express more, and you can extrapolate more information from a smaller mechanic, or at least a condensed, uh, easy, uh, easily interfaced mechanic that can inform more so, and then you you utilize. Now this, I took baseball, and what mechanic would be. I can't remember. Maybe I came up with a mechanic. This would be perfect for baseball. But there's moments like that, like when Jason made the Canadian football game. He looked at the the boxing KO game. He's like, oh, this would be perfect for that. So if you can find a theme or a game that fits the mechanic, or the mechanic can express, then it's gold and it's satisfying. But that's what happened with Rundown. The baseball game. A lot of it, what the rundown mechanism is you're literally building teams. In the game, it has the rules for building teams, kind of essentially like the backyard basketball, where you got what you have point wise, but this points you buy cards, right? So you got so many complement of cards that you buy. I think 20, 28, or 30 or so, but you can only spend so many points as far as the literally the value of the card. Uh, is going to be the ability of the card. So, or the ability of the player when you go out to play. There's defensive and offensive, and when you're playing these cards down, when you're flipping them over, it's kind of like has a Dominion type deck building aspect of it. Uh, when you play the card against the pitch, against the defender's pitch, and he rolls it. It's very much like war, but if you get on the base, then you can progress around the bases only if uh, the pitcher doesn't strike out, or if the next card doesn't get it, it's just an out. So that three down, that three out is definitely live as you're trying to progress runners around the base from first, second, third, home. And these cards, the more powerful, the more, the higher number they are, obviously, is the more powerful and the more chance of getting around the bases. But when they do get around the bases, you literally take the card itself that got around the base and you add it to the scoreboard, right, which takes it out of immediate play, out of your hand, which you get a point for it, right? So that's the score. So you're up 1-0 or have you. So there's negatives to like your really higher cards getting burned out or burned through, but they do earn you points if they can make it around the bases when they get up. If they're supported by their other teammates, as it were, the other cards. But yeah, I find it really, it definitely has that war type thing and trying to make your almost like a solitaire thing. We're trying to get around the bases. War, but you can play it against somebody else. All right, play it as a solo and just flip 2 cards and see what goes around. After 3 outs, then flip teams. Or flip the situation, and one's the batter and the other's the pitcher. But anyway, I like it. I like how it came out. I think it's a strong game. I did put it for the Clark and Addison game, see if they might want to do something with the cards. I mean, I could do this on Game Crafter, or I get Card Creator, different things like that. But literally, where my love and passion and focus is right now is on creating games. So, for me to go through, I've been trying to learn Affinity to be able to put these games out, more polished as we go along. And Lord knows, doing the games themselves and learning Affinity at the same time, like I didn't know until recently. I was trying to do bullet points with asterisk marks, which you'll see that peppered all the way through certain, it hollows, and then it wasn't until this recent game when I discovered that you could actually trigger the bullet points without doing that. So as I progress through and learn the system, it gets easier, more intuitive to do. It's not so much a struggle, but that's just the learning curve, to get there. So this is joy in the agony and the ecstasy, as they say. But the Flash KO historical heavies, this is what Jason put out. He made a list. Eventually, I believe he's going to do the middleweights and the lightweights or featherweights, maybe a list that is pretty much free. Now on here, if you get them on here, 99 cents is the least I can charge for anything, because Lulu's going to get their take out of it. I believe Jason on his channel, which is linked on Waxworks here. I've got it. I think he will probably have this on his in his database of PDFs that you can access. So if you do have Flash KO, you can go there and pick up the historical heavies and be able to utilize them if you want to in the Flash KO game. All right, so he'll keep you up to date whenever he fills out the other, the other weight classes, as it were. But definitely something I'd pick up to expand the Flash KO experience. Now here we go. The Dungeon Time Overland Adventure module. If you reference back to when I spoke about Dungeon Time, utilizing Jason's time engine to make the dungeon crawler, definitely old school. Well, I had a map on there, right, just for the different locations. It inspired Jason to take this up and utilize travel in between those locations, right? So the Overland Adventure module is an expansion to Dungeon Time, fairly cheap expansion, and it adds so much more richness that you take your Dungeon Time is generally like you've got to curate you're basically, in a way, it could be said like starting a guild, and you have a team of adventurers, basically. And the more treasure you get, the more adventurers you can add to your stable, and you can have enough in your stable to be able to maybe even get it up to not only rotating out, which certain of the 3 archetypes in there, from priest to thief to warrior. Which one might be stronger, as it were, because they each have ratings. To approach different dungeons, you could have enough, um, if you build up enough money as a guild to have two parties running, or maybe three. So it's definitely, it lends to more like covering the land and trying to root out and suss out all the negative, uh, inhabitants that are, to root out the goblins or whatever in the dungeon. Uh, you need to build up a little stable of adventurers. So it's all instead of starting an adventurers guild ultimately with dungeon time. But this overland adventure module adds that. It just, yeah, it brings it full circle to where you traverse the map. You have mechanisms that that allow you to get to that place you're getting to. Rules for that, and then you switch to dungeon time and go in there and handle the business at large, and then you have to come back out and make it back to where you're going, right, to your base of operations. So to resupply and whatnot. So a refresh basically. Uh, but anyway, yeah, I'm really appreciative that he did that, and it really added a whole other layer of appreciation of an adventure to the game. Now this right here is just the ebook version of both together, of both Dungeon Time and the Overland Adventure module. And this here is the book of it. So the book itself, and this is one where I struggled with the AI. It wasn't really that difficult in creating a title for this one. Ironically enough, the other one I was beating my head up against the wall, but this one came out fairly easy without much tweaking, as it were. Now I'll put the wording and whatever on via Affinity, the fonts and whatnot. And on the back is actually art, three or four composites of different clip arts that I pasted together in Affinity, and it gave it kind of a layer of depth of different things happening. And it shows the overland aspect of it, where the front of the title has in the dungeon, the back of this book, back of the physical book, has the overland group traversing, the ruins off in the distance. So it shows a little travel. So anyway, I like the way this turned out, and the game as a whole turned out. There's also inside of Dungeon Time, there's a layout for you to create your own dungeons, as it were, and or at least what triggers certain sentences to be written out. And hopefully modules will come to follow that you can, to be a downloadable PDF that you can explore different areas and different maps. So it's definitely built toward expansion. All right. So let me see here. Back up the list. Yeah, this is where we were. Now we get a breakaway rush. Now what? Breeze Carousel. That was the other one. So there is definitely 5 in that. Breeze Carousel has a unique, a unique pass and play aspect of making the poker hand, where you get to see a little bit as the cards are passed around from hand to hand. You get to see what the player just passed up to your right or left. I believe there's a switching point too, like an Uno, where it changes directions, I believe. And but it's kind of interesting getting that little glimpse into what they passed up on, what you have, what you select, and you have to pass it to the person, to your left as it goes around. So you can maybe glean, or they can glean what you by seeing what they received of what you may be trying to build in your own hand. But nevertheless, like I said, all these poker-like games have a different aspect to them, and a different mechanism that lets you engage in a totally different way toward building poker hands. But this back to Breakaway Rush. Now, this is one of my favorites. As far as it takes the Flash KO engine, and essentially what it does is, it still uses the outer margin in the inside threshold uh, to trigger certain breakaways, certain shot on goals, or what have you. But like I said, just like a momentum with the Flash KO, if you're on where Flash KO had momentum being more of a representation of who had momentum in the fight, who was pressing the other, who was pressing at the time the other opponent to be able to break down their defensive and get in an effect, right? So you looked at the momentum tracker and you're like, it's him, and whenever it affects, it'll be this way. If you didn't have momentum, it would just affect it. And, there's that fork. It would affect him in a different way. Now, but with Breakaway Rush, momentum literally, like when you move that tracker, it literally shows the puck which side the momentum transfers, analogous to moving that little meeple or that that token to your opponent's side of the field. So when you're pushing in on them, there's a visual, immediate recognition that you're on their side. So therefore, it's going to automatically, that it's going to be more so apparent that it's going to trigger a certain thing that wouldn't if you was on the other side of the field. So it's aligned with basically a visual reference. So that to me is why I liked it. It actually took it. It was a theme that in a sport that allowed it to be uh, to transfer that, break that fourth wall in a way of tabletop to actual game. When you're moving that token, it's not just representative of how much pressure it is, but you can visually see the puck going on their side of the field, and immediately which side of that fork that effect is going to take place. You know. Um, but anyway, yeah, I love that one. Like I said, 2 hockey games. I think I wanted to make a breakaway hockey from the big country because I like hockey. Buddy of mine, he hated sports, but he loved hockey, and so do I. So I mean, it's fast, intense, and it'll get you there. Uh, Not so big of a soccer fan, unless you're probably inside of an arena or something, But it's a little bit too long between spikes, and hockey isn't that way. But nevertheless, we go from here. The Breeze collection, it has all the games in one collection that you can get and have at the table. Um, it says 8.5 by 11, so it's a bigger size book. I might one day get it down to a 6 by 9 or so, have a little bit more like a handbook at the table. That would be more so appropriate, but this is a bigger book. But I would reconfigure that, I believe, and put it in a smaller edition, and probably put that out at some point. Um, Now, Badlands. Now, after I did the Breeze collection, I went into Badlands. Now, trying to make poker with poker cards, I'd realized while I've been designing the other games, a large part, especially games like the backboard basketball, or where you're or the batter up baseball, where you're rolling these, it's a roll and sort kind of pool dice system, where you're counting them or you're sorting them or whatever. I realized that you could roll dice, 5 dice, and get a 5 hand of poker cards, but not obviously by the suit, but by the number, and it would be limited to that extent, right? So, but you could still take the same approach of whether you get a full house by 3 of the same, and then 2 other numbers, 2 sixes, 3 fours is obviously better than 2 sixes and 3 twos. It's a stronger hand. So you're trying to build this. Now, what is interesting, and I pulled this from the Breeze games too, is this a pay-to-play, primarily a pay-to-play system. So you're throwing tokens in by how far you want to re-roll something, or how it gains you access to each roll to try to better your hand. So while you're spinning a chip and throwing it into the center pool to be pulled out by somebody at the end, it just gives you an opportunity to re-roll and try to better your hand. So how far do you want to push your luck to get there? Now this ended up exploding into not just 5 games like the Breeze Collection did, which I said the Breeze Collection was the predecessor to this and led into Badlands. What this enabled me to do for the Breeze Collection was to go into Badlands, and I'd always I get the idea of the 6-shooter, right, the gun. Well, that set up a whole almost not only a theme, but a theme that you could flow through from game to game, and these games would model different different situations or that you might encounter in the Wild West or the Badlands, right? Whether there's claim jumping or whatnot, and the people around the table, you could literally. This game is meant to be as like if you got a group that shows up every week or whatever, you could go through these games. Some of these games, and there's 11 of them to start, and it's progressively. They almost teach as they go. So certain mechanisms will transfer and roll over into the next game, which has a little bit more meaty. Maybe doesn't, and it's totally mechanically built in a different way, but it adds some complexity, and it's set up in to where it represents or expresses the theme or this or the cosmic theme of the Wild West or the Badlands, basically. Like I said, claim jumping, or you can have poker shooter. All of them are kind of named in a way where you go through almost. It's not really a legacy game, so to speak. It is narratively. There is pages in the book where you make notes on what occurred, so you can build a little side narrative that really is just a way of keeping track and prompting memories of play that you had at the table, right? So and so got this, or so and so won that hand, or if you could lose a hand, it's almost like a little narrative trigger to the negative, like you lost that claim, and then you had to go do something else or move along. So it kind of it's plot points, as it were. So every game is kind of a plot point. Isn't leading to some kind of an overarching ultimate trigger, but it does inform and infuse the group story as you go along. In some of these games, you're trying to bluff one another. In other games, like posse shooter, you're trying to work together to make the best hands as a group. Or bluffing, you're trying to see which one comes out on top. So it's definitely built like the Breeze Collection in that you approach each game differently, and it's a different experience, a different time lengths per game. So it'll be varied, but I would say probably about 3 nights worth of 2 to at most 3 nights worth of play would get you through the whole of the game experience. So that's why I reference Legacy, because Legacy games like Risk Legacy or different games like that, you usually play those and you mark those down, and then they're one and done. This isn't the case. This kind of breaks that, so you can have a totally different experience. You're not marking up the game. It's not like a one and done. It's not meant to be that way. But the replay value is great, and you can keep notes of what the play was like, what it experienced. You can reread those, and it might bring something to mind. I generally took that concept and folded it over in Hollows too. You'll see that later on. But it's something how when I'm creating these games, one little notion will infuse or cause an expansion into a different way. Just like Breeze games open up the aspect of poker via the dice in the 6-shooter, which I've had that idea of a 6-shooter for a long time, and it finally found a home in this, and it came out in Badlands. We go here. It Hollows. Okay, I've just mentioned that. Now this game started out with Dawn of Man. Okay, uh, LOA had mentioned, which longtime friend and one in the role playing community. Um, and it goes by Umbermancer. So I'd reached out to him about utilizing that name because I had this concept of, especially Dawn of Man being uh, Neolithic or whatnot, of being more of a short term one shot almost of like just a classic kind of, maybe you might say, the fear of the shadow, or the things, or maybe of the supernatural, or some kind of the unknown, so that that's really heavily on people. And you got things like Medicine Man, and you got this and that they get together. There's one thing. There's a game on Roleplay Cafe where I did a test play of that, of the very early version, the initial version with Jason, just a one-on-one of Dawn of Man, and it was interesting. And I did this. This started like, I don't know, 4 years ago or so. I started down that path. We made. I, I put it to the side, but it was always inside of my mind. And generally, it started. It's funny because it started out like Breeze Collection going to Badlands, but it started with cards. Um, I called it the Gloaming. This placeholder name for the main game. Uh, Being the Umbermancer, the Umbra is like that point, like when you see an eclipse. I think that might have had something to do with it too. It was during that time of the eclipse. That umbrage area, where dark goes from light. So that's what he was exploring. The tendency of like early men to be afraid of like what was in the dark or what was just beyond it. Also, that there was the spark, generally from the Neolithic, spark caveman type thing, but it also the spark of life, and they need to go on and persevere and make something. Um, this ended up being uh, something that I express with cards being, first I thought poker chips, honestly, and ended up being cards. So with the black representing the shadow, are those like the Medicine Man that could delve into or manipulate or commune with or whatever. Uh, the game as a core is very malleable and flexible, that it can approach different types of genres. Okay, so when I'm talking to here, there's a little bit of hesitancy about how exactly I want to explain it, and that's because it can express a, a fairly you know a, a fairly good range of genres. But the core mechanic itself has to deal with that the red represents uh, humanity's need to strive and to persevere and just go that extra mile to keep alive, right? In the face of what may be from age to ever encroaching darkness or whatever, that could be taking or sucking the life out of you. And you see this in across the board, and in movies and books and whatever, like The Shadow of Mordor, as opposed to, but I don't want to put a name to it because a lot of it is just that ambiguous in a certain way of expressing it. That's what I'm trying to tap into. Now, I was doing the gloaming, like thought about calling it Beyond the Pale or different things, like when you're going beyond that, because I had like the closer in to the shadow that you get, or away from wherever, I kind of sit on my bed as a one shot that, for whatever community was overshadowed, or whatever passerby was overshadowed by the animal, by the shadow that was that was coming from a primary source. uh, you know the heroes would be compelled to root it out, or for whatever reason, you know and we've all, well, play role-playing games where closer you get into the evil, the less you hear of nature, the less, there's some aspects of that. So that's what began that search into what eventually, in one aspect, became It Hollows. Now, it's still, the main game's still there. It hadn't been put out yet. I'm still working on that. Uh, it can be pretty brutal, but what came to mind was the exploration of existential horror. Now, in more of a niche variety of that, to where it's not like Cthulhu or in that aspect of there's no known reality, as it were. At least in those games, you're discovering something. It's a discovery to where uh, you can make sense of something, even if it's that there is a something that you can't make sense of out there, this separate from you. But this It Hollows is more of a introspective. It's an existential horror. Like, the dread that you feel individually or as a party that something isn't right. It's that the turn back on, uh, like when you like living with yourself. If you had to look at yourself like in a mirror, you wouldn't like what you see. As far as like some of the things that you may be turning a blind eye to, or justifying your ills to live with yourself. This It Hollows explores different hollowing sites, which allows you to be, the case files, basically, like you are one of the individuals that was in one of these situations, and this is what you, uh, through the aberrations and the manifestations of whether natural or spiritual or cosmic or any variety like that, that you have to try to sustain yourself and try to question what is real, even inside your own mind. So that's what it really delves into. So it is exactly a fringe, further extreme representation of the core game of It Hollows. But for some reason, I think I wanted to do this because I feel like a lot of the RPGs that has to do with uh, existential horror is a bit, the insanity that's supposedly felt it tries to be represented by the player, but it is more so a mechanism that you reference that your player is to this degree of insanity, and it puts the onus on the player itself to represent the character's degree of insanity or what they're having to deal with. And maybe sometimes you can slip in or immerse yourself in the shoes of that individual to a certain extent. But I wanted the mechanisms themselves in the game to represent that, almost that existential dread. Uh, and I'll reference it as pressure that you feel. So I wanted this was an example that, like I said, what started with the cards and the black and red and what it means. It Hollows is an exploration into that of really addressing those two aspects of life, death, reality, uh, supernature, and our understanding of it. So it's a little bit. It's a game that's more nuanced, subtle, and can be probably appreciated if you want to delve into it. Granted, it is still set up as a one shot. Of course, all the one shots I've ever been in is 2 or 3 sessions, but it has some built-ins as far as being kind of timed. There's also, like I said, in Badlands, when I started initiating the use of like writing notes down, well, this right here at Hollows took it to another level to where you're writing notes down, but for yourself, not sharing it with the group, but for yourself to see, like, if you, as your character, from that character's perspective, and to keep the focus and in the mindset of the character, writing down from what they see and what they, as whatever their profession is, how they make sense of things. So you can, as a player, understand if you're a photojournalist or if you're a physician, and you'll kind of go from that, your understanding of those professions, go from that and try to extrapolate what is real or what is real or what you may know or what may test your outer boundaries of your knowledge. It Hollows will do that, and It Hollows is based off of Dark Age of Man, as far as the presenter seed, where we utilize the seeds. So it isn't it isn't it really works well with that system in that there isn't a traditional GM that presupposes anything or has anything tracked out or plotted for you, because they play from a perspective that they don't know. And I played Dark Age of Man not enough to know that, from presenter side, that it is those moments where the presenter is surprised by, as the players, about what actually dovetails and makes sense, from one thing to the next. And you go, and you have those moments. And, I always reference, like, when my son played, he ran a little group, his D&D group, and he said he came back and he said, everybody wasn't there, so I just broke out Dark Age of Man and we ran it. And he said it was, I think he was playing the scenario that I had in there, and he rolled a seed. The first one of the inciting incidents was about, a hound, supposedly rabid, that was troubling the farmers, and it was the prince's hound, and there was the thing going around. That was just one of the incidences that when you drop into the thing that they heard of. Well, the players actually wanted to go follow that up, track down this hound. Well, while he was out there, my son rolled a seed to see what would upset the apple cart, or what would become, or exasperate, or accelerate, or what have you, the situation. And he rolled haunt, and at first he thought, haunt, how does that? And then he said, the dog isn't rabid, it's possessed. So that changed the whole dynamic of what they were going to do. And you can't achieve this normally in games, like in traditional referee games. But the seed system that Jason came up with and we implemented into Dark Age of Man does that. So I'm implementing that here. Granted, it's done in a different way. There's 2 layers of it. I've coupled it with the basically moments of escalation, because there's a lot of what these games are, whether the core game of the gloaming, there's a refresh rate, right? So as you expend cards, it goes into this pool, and then there's a bottleneck to when you get refreshed, right? But It Hollows has a very restricted refresh rate. Literally, at every escalation point, which there's 2, you get back 1 card, right? So you've got to, this also limits the ability of the people to spam something, right? Like we've all, RPG players get in their room, like, the guy with the 20 strength, or whatever, let me try to lift it. Oh, you fail. And the guy over there with the 5 strength goes over to lift it because his roll was good. No, this, you have to, every die roll that there's 2 ways the system approaches resolution, whether it's task-based, kind of like a ability roll traditionally, or whether it's contested. That could be up against the environment, or up against some mechanization, or a madman for all that reason. What the world's pushing back, right? So the world the presenter is representing, has pushback. So it's a contested roll. It's resolved differently, and you've always got an even shot, but you expend cards to leverage it in your favor. But there's a very limited amount of cards, so you got to be very wise, and that tricks that pressure aspect. It tricks those beads of sweat to come down. And what do you really want to know? Do you really want to expend black cards to find out what is exactly going on, even though the presenter not knowing that you'll have an epiphany too, of when it happens? Or do you want to use red whenever you're dealing with reality or physicality or anything like that? And that, so those 2 approaches of how you're trying to address things in the game, are borne out on those cards. You simply just build your character on a 10 card. They at least minimum have to have 1 red or 1 black, and 1 red is almost like a threshold for hit points or wounds. Get down to 1 black. There's ways that your red will be reduced. You hit black totally, you get hollowed out, basically like a husk of yourself just staring off into the abyss is it's beautiful, like in 2001. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up about this game, but you put a lot of work into that. It's the RPG, but it is just one aspect of the gloaming, which which is a placeholder name, but granted, that'll be the core universal game that comes out that has several modules about that explores different ways. But it Hollows, I thought, warranted, especially with how much love has been on existential horror, and this is more of a fringe niche expression of existential horror. Something like Stalker, the movie. Where isolation is kind of and self-exploration of what is real and what isn't is at the forefront. Um, Nevertheless, this is where I broke off and I was doing these mini games, right? Everything from Canadian curling, sorry Todd, uh, to sumo to whatever, and they were like little games that was kind of formulated around like the Badlands and the Breeze, where it's a collection of different games, right? But they were micro games. Still got that, but one of them was micro rally. Well, I love rally games. Like used to play them on 64 back in the day, and that was primarily the reason I had the 64 was for the racing games, especially the rally games that I had that I would get. So I love that concept, but I took that sprint and I elevated it past that and made a version that eventually became Rally Sprint, but that only touches the surface. I curated this because this is probably one of the more deeper experiences I've had, especially with a sports game. Um, the Rally Sprint is very, very easy, right? It's literally 4 segments of a race. You roll a contested die and then you find out what happens, right? Uh, it's pretty simple. Like I said, I have to sell it for 99 cents. Can't get it lowered, but it's free. And Jason has it available in his files, which if you're on Waxworks here, you can go to. I have his link, his channel, Jason Flash Football, and go there and pick it up, see if you like it, or send me an email, and I'll send you a copy. But otherwise, you can get it here if you want to donate Lulu 99 cents. But anyway, it just gives you a test drive, as it was to what is to come with Rally Race. This game is Rally Race Core Operations. Okay, I'll go here to General Access and look at it. The corporations, basically, I expanded this out to where we're dealing with the Rally Race itself, the core loop, mechanical loop of driving these races, right? And this is where I expand from 4, as in the sprint, to 6 segments per race. And you can have a series, you can build, has rules for building your own series and whatnot, but it's limited to the rally race itself, right? Now, Jason had asked me about the co-driver, making it more immediate. And I have a tendency to bake things into, like I said earlier, like what the mechanic can represent across the board, a multitude or express a multitude of aspects of the game. So I like to distill down to a minimal complexity. So it's intuitive and it can roll and you can just, play basically. But it got me thinking, and I went down a rabbit hole. It was a very fruitful one because I realized once I started to, especially in developing rally career operations, that I saw that there was a little bit, this game Core Operations has basically 2 mechanisms for how you want to play or how you want to invest in the rally itself. You can kind of go from the driver. The main default, I would say, the default way of playing is from the driver's perspective, and this was based off, it was the natural progression from the rally sprint to where you're having to utilize a 2d6 bell curve, and the closer you can get on that center of the bell curve, the more you can hold a balanced race, right? Unless you go off the rails, as it were, right? and get more strain or wear on your car and whatnot. And you got to keep it alive. So it gives you all that information. Now, the other aspect, just to get more streamlined, if somebody wanted to roll, just to see what happens or what occurs and it needed to be for the other cars, especially that you were going up against. There is one chart that you roll 2d6, and it isn't a bell curve. It's linearly, it's inverted, as it were, right? So the further away the bottom, the more catastrophe, the more toward the top, the more you nail it. So it just operates in two different ways. But that ended up being, after Jason suggested that, and I looked at it, developing career operations that, yeah, it would increase the overhead a little bit, but it would make it a little bit sharper if I did something and added a second layer of wear. And this is where I put decay into the system, right? So it's almost like playing back in the day when you have those fighting games. Some of them, like I'm talking about like video games where you're playing like Street Fighter or whatever, and there's a health bar going down. Well, decay is like stamina. Okay, so it's like a secondary tier of boxes that you check off while you're trying to continually hold, because you will pick a posture of balanced, of aggressive, or of conservative. Now, if you're a little bit ahead of the rate and you're good, but you don't want to incur any more damage, you might want to roll conservatively. It's more of a safer roll. You don't really get ahead so much, but you don't incur so much damage on the vehicle. And then you got your balanced, and then you got your aggressive. But if you're trying to push that balance, which most people have a tendency, through playtesting, to see that people would hover around that balance more so than need to be, and it would be less. It would almost like a default to balance. So when Jason said that about the co-driver, it gave me a perfect way to sharpen this game of core operations, to say that if you maintain that balance there, which is a danger logistically, statistically, about 60% of the times when you're rolling, you're going to stay in balance. And if you maintain it, it's going to build up your stress, and when that stress triggers, it's going to take that fatigue up, and the fatigue builds decay, and that's a whole other aspect that allowed me to mitigate with the team members that will come into play with core operations. So in other words, the co-driver becomes a bridge between rally operations, core operations, and is only kind of mechanically represented in part in the rally race core operations. It bridges over into the between rally race career operations segments. So as akin to dungeon time, where you're in the dungeon, and then the overland travels. Well, rally race career operations, which is here, and I just released this yesterday. Career operation goes into the team members and how they affect in between rally races. Your team incurs damage, where it has to offset that before the next rally, which you can have a series of rallies. This game delves into, like, starting with tier C, which is basically beginners, has sponsors. It goes to tier B, middle grade, and all the way to tier A. So you can literally start this kind of in like a Badlands, where you start at the bottom, and the more you progress through from tier C to tier B, and you have to you get these team members that will bolster and reset you in between rallies. And like I said, the co-driver is the only one that's kind of halfway effectual in the rally, as far as the way it mitigates some of the damage done, that has to be contended to in between the rally. And it's basically only using from that one perspective of that 2d6 bell curve from the driver's perspective when you're utilizing it. Otherwise, co-driver isn't really there. But I saw, like I said, when I was using the bell curve as opposed to the linear 2d6 resolution for basically the other drivers, or if you want to take an owner's perspective, you can just roll that bell curve. But it's a little bit more, it's sharper and not as forgiving as the 2d6 driver's position. So me adding the co-driver Decay balanced that out. You see, so it becomes a little bit hairier for the 2d6 driver as it has another component to have to deal with, which is decay. Increases the overhead a little bit, but it levels out to where both of those, whether you want to play from a driver's perspective, the statistically the outcome of those mechanically is right in line with the 2d6 bell curve that the driver rolls on, right? When he changes posture, it makes him change posture a little bit, makes it a little bit more hairy, but he has to contend with that. But see, a lot of times you won't even have an effective code driver. This is what Rally Race Career Operations brings to the front. It brings team members. It only references them in corporations, but it brings them to bear. It brings full rally seasons, legacy mode, from whether you want to start at tier C and climb your way up to tier A. Opponents, you're always racing in your tier, your pack, and to see where you can jockey for position from that point. That's the immediate area that you're trying to resolve. But if you're getting the top of those positions, you're going to transfer over to the bottom of tier A. Like if you're from tier B, you get up there, you'll trigger to tier A. Same way from tier C to tier B. So it's a climb. I would say overall you're going to be 35 to 40 games in, or 40 rallies in before you wrap up your career, if you can make it that long, right? Now, I'm certain, if you play wise and build your team accordingly. So narratively, you've got all your team members from engineer to co-driver, if you're utilizing that. And want to mitigate some of that if you're playing it from the 2d6 bell curve direct resolution standpoint from a driver. You might want to get a co-driver. And what I mean by that is, whenever you're a manager and tiers that you have and sponsorships that you get, when you go up a tier, you will get, from local sponsors in tier C's to national sponsors at tier B, and then major sponsors in tier A's, which those open the doors to more positions on your team that you can fill with tier operatives. So tier team members grant you certain abilities to more so mitigate damage that is incurred in the rallies, so you can stay alive longer. But the tiers, as you progress them, become a little bit more overhead, a little bit more mathy. Nothing gets to the point of where it breaks, but you just have more that you're operating on. But it's a balancing act. So that's where you start with the Rally Race Corporations, go to the Rally Race Career Operations, and it'll let you expand those beyond the rallies into series and careers, everything. Even in career operations, you got season 1, the official season 1s. And then, later on we'll have downloadable content for season 2, season 3. You can engage those however you like, from whatever tier perspective you want to jump in there. There's even teams listed that you'll be going up against, or that you can man yourself. Some of them I have listed as direct resolution. But in firm, you can just do linear resolution just to roll and do a quick resolution for each team. Nothing wrong with that. It pans out. Nevertheless, that's it, and that was just released yesterday, as it was. So, like I said, I've got, as you heard me mention, certain other games, primarily the Gloaming, or whatever. That's a placeholder name, but I'll be working on that. Space Age of Man, obviously, is the big one. I'm trying to work on these games and get them to where they're more polished, to where we can put Space Age of Man out properly and have it as a suitable follow-up to Dark Age of Man, and exploring and different mechanisms, as you see through this whole walkthrough of all these games, how one mechanisms may have inspired or sparked a different expression through another game and become more realized. From the Breeze collection, adding it to the Badlands, adding it to a theme. From the Badlands, taking notes, adding it to End Hollows, and then adding a depth So yeah, it's links in the chain. So yeah, I appreciate anybody who supports us, Candlelight Games, and on our journey. And hopefully, the more refined we get, we're just trying to put out honest expressions of games and games that you can enjoy and that we enjoy, and hopefully hits your table and you find that you like them too. Granted, not everything can be a hit, but there's definitely a flexibility and of approach in how we want to express different games in different ways, and see them come to the table, and see what works, what really works. What we generally, Waxworks here, I want to delve into things that you try, things that don't work out, things that maybe do, things that maybe fold over into another game and can be better expressed elsewhere. Whatever the case is, that's all exploratory, and that's the intent of the channel, for me to express and share some of this that I've been doing. Pretty much just Jason and I are, he builds his. He's got his own workshop. I got mine, and we get together and build some games together. But we're also exploring and building on our own, as we go. But nevertheless, that's it. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. Yeah. But other than that, I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.